The Who, despite their success in the 60s, their enormous influence in the 70s and the 80s, were not so commercially valuable. Why it was so, and many other things, are discussed by all of the surviving members, Pete Townsend, John Entwistle and Roger Daltrey. The Who's last live performance was on the Live Aid.
How does a number become the Pete Townsend number or the difference of the Who number?
There shouldn't really be any difference, I suppose, but there is. I learnt that there needed to be when we did the Who's last album, Face Dances, which I thought was a very good record with a lot of energy put into it, but it was ineffective. It didn't work, and I can't work out why exactly. And the band and the producer of the album, Bill Sims, we were all very unhappy with it because it didn't seem to work. It should have done. And I think it was just the material. I think the songs weren't right for the band. They were good songs, but they were out of context. It was almost like somebody like Lulu, or somebody who's not normally associated with deep thought, singing a song about, combat rock or something. It was pretentious. There was something pretentious about that record, but I think it was probably because of its obsession with darkness to some extent. The Who are not a band that are associated with that kind of looking towards darkness. How can you do it alone? That song was about shame, a song about shame. Cash Cash was about giving up everything, what life is like if you give up everything. It is possible. But it is also extremely uncomfortable, but not dangerous, I think the two best songs on there are the two fairly optimistic ones, You Better, You Bet and Daily Records. They're like pop songs and they seem to work. But I suddenly realised that The Who was, if anything, a machine of almost celebratory spiritual quality, like at its best. Stuff like My Generation, Won't Get Fooled Again, The End of Tommy, Listening to You, I Get the Music, stuff like that. It's all quite joyous in a sense. And I'd actually lost I'd forgotten in a sense that The Who were such a vehicle for that. And I was sort of just thinking, well, I'll keep writing and I'll write whatever I feel I should write. And as an individual, I haven't really got that capacity to write that, to perform that kind of stuff. And I was denying myself, I suppose, the right to write it. So from now on, I think I am... What I'm saying is that I didn't separate the two enough, and now I'm trying to more. I think that I can do certain things on my own. I can probably get more introspective and examine myself more on records than anybody I know practically, and get away with it. I'm like almost as much as somebody like Leonard Cohen. I can really get all kind of curled up in myself, and people don't mind too much. Can't do that with The Who at all. Mustn't do that with The Who.
Interesting how it's opposite to what you said in one of the interviews after the Empty Glass album. That if The Who were doing the album at the time, the Empty Glass could have been The Who album.
Yeah.
Which, in other words, that All the Best Cowboys couldn't have been The Who album, but Pete Townsend album.
Yeah, that's where I think I was wrong. I think I was wrong then. And I think the mistake was pointed up really by the ineffective of Face Dances, which I put just as much effort into the writing of the material as I did into Empty Glass, but it didn't work out right. And on this album that we're doing with The Who at the moment, we're about halfway through it. I haven't tried particularly hard on the material. I haven't sat and ruminated and tortured myself to get anything out. I've just written the songs that I think are right for the band, and they're much, much, much better for them. Much more effective. What happens, you see, is I think when I'm writing for myself, I tend to try to work to make the song do it all. But when you've got a vehicle like The Who, the band itself contributes so much. The idea of the image that people have for the band, even its negative side, you can use positively. the fact that it's such a big institutionalised thing, the fact that it's a supergroup, the fact that it's been going for such a long time, the fact that Roger is a very strident and powerful, charismatic front individual, the fact that John is such a solid character, the history of the band. You know, all those things actually work really well. They change a song completely. But sometimes, I don't know, you know, that sometimes, I think, for example, I mean, I'm going back to Face Dances again. There were a couple of songs on there that I think on this album that I don't know would have been really quite remarkable in the context of my own stuff. But for The Who, just did not work. They just didn't work. And I do think that, you know, I haven't been doing solo albums very long. I've only done one and then this one. So I'm still learning about how to, you know, develop in different directions. I actually enjoying that side of it to some extent. It's one of the things that has given me a new appetite to work on The Who. You know, I suddenly see something there which is fascinating and interesting and challenging. You know.
Why haven't you done a solo album before? I mean, John started doing it rather early in the dance career.
Yeah, John had less opportunities to express himself through the band, though, didn't he? His material wasn't really all that suited to the group somehow. I don't know why. I mean,
except in a couple of instances.
Yeah, a couple of instances. We used to find that John was very shy at putting his material across too. Which I thought was strange, but I think one of the things John has always felt is that he writes for pleasure, and if the band identify with something that he does, he's happy. But if they don't, he's not really quite prepared or equipped to write a song to the Who brief, as it were. Which is basically what I'm saying. I believe needs to be, you know, pandered to. I think I would have started earlier had I not felt that it would damage the input to the Who. I'm not incredibly prolific as a writer. I only write under pressure. So I think that was basically it. You know, if I'd have felt that I could actually produce the massive material that was required, I would have started earlier. Because there have always been things that I've done that the Who couldn't do, and vice versa. So, you know, I've always been tempted to do it. I suppose the thing that always used to go through my mind is I used to think, well, why should I, Pete Townsend, as a solo artist, be lumbered with doing everything that the Who can't do? You know, it's not fair in a sense. It makes it look like me in isolation will only do ballads or songs about food or, you know, TV commercials or classical music. You know, whereas really they're just a part of what I do, and I'm most effective in the rock field. Later on I realised that distinction that I'd made was a bit coarse. But nonetheless, it did prevent me for a long time. In fact, at the moment, somebody who works for me, a girl called Spike, and one of the engineers that works in my company, are going through all the tapes, the demo tapes that I made over the last 20 years, with a view to actually extracting the material of value that the Who didn't do and putting it together into an album, or maybe a couple of albums. And possibly with some of the demos, the better demos from that particular period, the original tapes. And it's quite remarkable how much stuff there is there that is just completely peculiar. You know, very, very strange stuff. I suppose what was going through my mind was that it would just really have confused things. I think if I'd started to bring out albums of me playing free piano for an hour and a half, you know. I was quite happy to do it and put it on tape and think, well, it's there. You know, I was
a future reference.
Yeah, I was fulfilled as a writer with the band, and I didn't really need to do it. The reason I signed a solo album deal, you know, was only because I thought with Atlantic, was only because I thought the Who weren't going to make another record. If I'd have known the Who were going to make another record, I wouldn't have done it.
I see.
So I ended up with probably a bit more work than I bargained for.
But the Face Dances was, I mean, actually your latest single, I mean the single taken off the album is Face Dances.
Yeah.
Which gave the title to the Who album, but it didn't make it.
No, it wasn't a song at that time, it was just a title.
Oh, I see.
It was, I suppose, a bit like, you know, Chinese eyes. It was a thing that I was carrying around in my head.
Until it developed.
Yeah, in fact I was doing the same thing then. I was using the term face dances. There was a girl that I knew, and she was sitting looking in the mirror, and she had a match in between her things. She was going like that with this match while she was doing her eyes. And I said to her, face dances, you know. And she just laughed, and then I started to use that in other contexts. You know, people would kind of go like that. It was only later on somebody pointed out to me that, I think it was an American, pointed out to me that in the Dune trilogy, that science fiction trilogy, there are a group of characters in it called face dancers, who are like chameleons. They can change completely for special purposes. And that must have stuck in my head, because I really loved the first one. I read it a long time ago. But that's where I got it from. When I did the single, for a while I thought about changing the title, but it didn't seem necessary really, so I just called it Part 2. It's a bit trite, but you know. Now that was never offered to the band. I don't think it's necessarily the kind of song that the band would do, but you know, that they would probably done it completely differently. It's hard to tell. You know, when I took a song in yesterday to the Who, which was quite a pop sounding song. You know, I suppose in the tradition of something like Face Dances or Let My Love Open the Door, or Squeeze Box, that kind of thing. And the way the Who did it, we started off trying to do it exactly the way I did it. Then it changed a little bit because John, as a bass player, needs to actually express part of his character and personality through the sound of his bass. And just the sound and the way that he was playing wasn't fitting the very ordered pop sound that I wanted. Kenny felt stilted just playing this disco rhythm that I'd got out of a computer. I actually felt stilted playing the guitar the way I had done on the demo. And in the end we actually allowed the band to breathe, and suddenly the song came through. It's just providing a different vehicle for the same song in a way. You know, the band probably could have done a very interesting version of it. But there are a couple of songs on my album that the band just couldn't have done at all. They would never have done Stop Hurting People correctly. I don't think... I think Sea Refuses No Rivers would have been great by the Who. But there's a couple of other things that I just don't think, you know, that would have made it properly. Uniforms I don't think would have worked. Because basically Uniforms is just synthesizer, that's all it is, you know. How can the Who do a track with just synthesizer? You have to add all the stuff on top. Yeah. And it was very important that it was just synthesizer really, and that the guitar was pushed back. You know, I wanted that kind of electronic, robotic noise.
Can you tell me something more about the album that the Who are doing at the moment?
Yeah, we started about a month ago. We're working with Glyn Johns, who produced Who's Next and Who Are You and all the early, very early Who stuff he engineered. And it's going extremely well. I mean, we're still very tentative about the future of the band, but we always have been. And we've always been on a razor's edge, and I think it's the way we like it, so we're getting used to it. But before we started recording, I sat down with everybody and I said, listen, what's the fucking album going to be about? What are we going to say? You know, I mean, I can't just go and write a load of songs again and bring them in and And, you know, in a sense, hope that you're going to feel good about them, or hope that they're going to be right for the band, or hope that the band's fans are going to think they're right for the band. Let's at least all decide how we want the album to fucking sound, or whether we want it to be different, or old sounding, or open, or loose, or tight, or what, you know. And even further, what we actually want the subject of the songs to be about. Before we commit ourselves, and then at least we know when we've completed the album, we won't feel like we did about Face Dances, because that was really fucking awful to actually say, well, yeah, it's a nice record, you know. Who made it? You know, whose fault was it? You know, and of course it was our fault. You know, we couldn't blame the producer, you couldn't blame the material. It was the band's fault. The band didn't even make an effort to appear on Face Dances. The Who didn't make an appearance. Everybody else did. John Entwistle, Kenny Jones, etc.
Yes.
You know, and I wrote the songs, but The Who wasn't there. You know, they were off somewhere else. And so we all decided, right, from stage one, it's the band are going to be there. And that's the way that we went in, and that we've managed to maintain that so far. And I must say the material's come out really good. I'm really pleased with it so far. What we decided, what we found we all had in common, we all did have a rather disturbed feeling about the planet at the moment. A feeling of tension which I think is growing now, particularly in Europe. And I think from people of our generation, it expresses itself not as an aggressive frame of mind, but rather as a realisation that we've been a pretty useless generation of people, I think. We've done very, very little. We haven't actually even fought for what we believed in. We've been pacifistic, we've been spoilt by peace. I'm talking about particularly this country, which has been fought for with the blood and guts of not just British people, but lots of other people as well. And we've just sat back under the nuclear umbrella, you know, and lived our lives, you know, taken our drugs, listened to our blues, you know. And, you know, I don't want to sound like fucking Pravda or anything, but I mean, you know, we have been a pretty impotent, unthinking...
I tend to agree with you.
You know, and it's like, I woke up, in a sense, from a period last year of the greatest decadence that I've ever been involved in. You know, where I really let my alcoholism overcome me. I went back to drug use, which I hadn't used drugs since 1967. Only for a short period, but long enough to kind of shock myself as to what I was doing. I thought, fuck it, you know, there must be something. I've got 2 growing children. There must be something that I can do about the planet. There must be something that I can do other than the occasional fucking concert for Amnesty International. You know, I must be able to do something, express something. You know, we've all must be able to do something. Is it to do with intuition? Is it to do with action? Because I'm not afraid to fight either. I'll admit that I don't know how to do it, and that I've never had to do it, but I'm not afraid to do it. Is it necessary? And so on. And we found that everybody in the band felt the same way, even though we all live very different lifestyles. I'm a radical socialist as a thinker, and pretty much in action. Roger is much more of an archetypal star. He lives his own private life. He invests his money directly in his own environment. I mean, he employs people and everything else, but there's no obvious altruism involved in it. You know, he just protects his family. So John and Kenny also lead fairly the kind of lives you'd expect them to lead. But I think between us all, you know, from my fairly hard stance on political issues, we go right across the board. And yet we all shared that, despite our differences. You know, Roger and I will sit and argue for hours about socialism. You know, he thinks it stinks. Or what I believe is that communism is inevitable. I don't think it's something that is necessarily 100% right in the forms that it's manifested now, but I think it's inevitable. I don't think that
and it's coming along nicely then in this country.
Sorry?
And it's coming along nicely then in this country. With different governments, but it's coming.
Yeah.
And it's infiltrating in the smaller ways, in the small bits and pieces.
I think in a sense it's the time for witch hunts if Margaret Thatcher wants to keep her dictatorship running. But I think we all felt, well, fuck the politics. What we all share is a great sense of concern for our children. What kind of world have we provided for them? We can't go on pretending that it's not our fault anymore, or that we're powerless. We can't continue to sit and, you know, it might be late, but it's what I said in another interview. It was in Rolling Stone, but when I read it back I thought it was quite right, that it's never too late to do something as important as this. It's also never too soon. You know, we really need to act now. And I felt that suddenly that the band had an outside purpose, in a sense. And it really did unify us a lot. It made us feel like human beings, part of society, living on a planet, not as isolated superstars who were worried about advancing middle age, money problems, whether or not they could buy a new radiator cap for their Rolls Royce or not. You know, we were living in the real world again. Despite the fact that we can't alter who we are, or, you know, the fact that we are, to an extent, set apart from society, but to re-establish our position as observers, as commentators, as writers, with a heavy emotional bias. And to a great extent, you know, it really has given the band a kind of a feeling of being again. From my own point of view, I'm almost desperate, you know. I mean, I'm almost kind of... I mean, my frustration has reached a fantastic peak. I don't quite know how to react to it, except to write, you know, it's all I know.
The question should be, well, how did you consider the Who? As a studio band or a live band? A live proposition?
It's a live band, really. How can I put it? I mean, there are plenty of other bands that sold more records than we did. A lot of other bands that were much better in the studio than we were. But as far as the live concerts were concerned, there just wasn't anybody. Yeah. I mean, there are a couple of bands that can actually compare as far as sort of selling out stadiums were concerned, but as far as the actual show went, I don't really think you can compare a Who show and a Stone show.
Is this album, the live album, has it been treated in any way? I mean, the audience sounds too far away, if you know what I mean. You know, like there are no mics for the audience in there.
No, we try to sort of get a balance between the audience and... so there was a lot of audience recorded, but usually when you record a live album, if you push the audience up, you get a nice sort of... you get the actual sound of the group in the hall going as well. But the way it had been recorded, there wasn't any of that. The audience was very clean and on their own. So if you pushed the audience up, all you got was audience. You got no ambience from the stage. So we had to really sort of concentrate on keeping the audience back, because they didn't actually give you anything extra. They didn't give you any room acoustics or anything like that. So
I heard there was a temptation of going back and overdubbing a few things, but you actually left it as it was, wasn't it? Like a pure concert.
That's pretty well as it was. Yeah. With, you know, all the mistakes and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds pretty rough as a last album. Which I think it's quite nice that you end up on a slightly aggressive note.
If you start replacing bits and pieces, then it's not a live album anymore. You know, with the Eagles live album, the only thing that was actually live was
the audience.
Yeah, and Joe Batali's drumming, but I think it was about it. You know, all the solos we replaced. I mean, it's just like going in and recording. You're re-recording your greatest hits. I mean, they just rubbed everything out except the audience and Joe Batali's parts. You know, the main band went in and we did everything.
Do you feel that those concerts that you've captured on the album were quite good? What do you think? I mean, they were definitely not your peak. I mean, there were better concerts.
Some of them were really good, but I mean, funnily enough, with us, the best concerts never actually get recorded. You know what I mean? Like
Maybe
the best tour that Who ever did was in 1976, and every show was excellent, and not one of those got filmed or recorded.
Maybe
In
it's subconscious,
1976,
you know?
the band were absolutely at their peak, and after the 76 tour, I don't think we actually never worked again. We never actually worked as a band with Keith again. So that was, I mean, after that tour, we actually felt like we could go on forever. You know, we could actually tour forever, but didn't work out. But usually the best shows don't get recorded off it. So you have to make do with what you've got. I mean, we did 18 of those concerts on the American tour. A lot of the really good ones just weren't up to it recording wise. You really sort of have to rely on whoever's recording the show.
Maybe it's even as Sasha was saying, it's like playing on your subconscious a little bit, you know, knowing that it's
If you
being
know that
recorded.
it's being recorded, you pull back a bit, you know, you don't give everything you've got, you know.
Well, no, I seem to remember we were pretty laid back on those tours. We weren't actually, we didn't, I don't think we were working on all our cylinders, but I think what we actually got on the album was the best of the concerts we did. You know, I think we had a lot of trouble with drums, the way the drums had been recorded. I think it worked out okay. I mean, I wasn't involved in the final mixes, so I haven't really listened to it.
This is the first time you were involved in final mix, because I think usually you are involved, aren't you?
That's right. You did a couple of compilations. Huh?
Yeah, but we kind of, I kind of felt sort of set up in a way, because we did the first album, which was a lot of some of Keith's stuff, you know, on one side, and then a Philadelphia concert on the two other sides, and then the up-to-date stuff on the other side. But the recording company wanted all our hits from the latest concerts. So we went back and started again, and I was involved with the mixes of that, and inevitably everyone said the bass guitar was too loud, so it got remixed, which I wasn't involved in. So
You started, the Who started, on the first day you started arguing, and I think you ended up arguing. Is that correct? Oh, I don't mean arguing, but you know that.
yeah, I mean, one of the important parts of the Who was 4 different characters and friction between us. I just felt that the 4 different characters in the band became so important individually that it got to the stage where no one would actually sort of back down from what they were trying to do. So you got 4 different ideas and no way to actually agree amongst yourselves on anything. So, and I think that's what finally sort of split the band. And also the fact that Pete just felt that he really couldn't write for the Who anymore, and he didn't want to write for the Who anymore.
Yeah, he said he had 80 songs or something, didn't he? He said he had about 80 songs, or he's got about 80 songs, because somebody asked him, did you have any more, have any more songs?
Oh yeah, he had plenty more material.
Yeah, and he said, yeah, about 80 songs.
But I've forgotten what Pete told me after his last solo album, that he felt that he couldn't write any more. Actually, what he said is that he was writing 2 personal songs for Roger to sing. You know, like in the earlier days, he was a spokesperson of the band. You know, like it was your, experience of the Who as a group. But then, in the latter part, he became just, too engrossing his own soul.
Yeah, I mean, sort of Roger. I don't think Roger found it that difficult to.
Yeah, Roger was saying, a couple of months ago that he didn't find that.
No, but
that was Pete's idea.
and also Pete said to me that he found it very difficult to write for my bass playing as well. He found that that the songs he was writing didn't make full use of the way I played. So he felt very put off by that.
So you got the message. You got the message then.
No, I mean, in the end, we all ended up with completely different musical tastes.
See, one thing
So
I
it's just like trying to force, each member of the band trying to force the rest of the band to do what they wanted to do, and it just didn't work out.
One thing that I could never understand is why, when you talk about, one talks about the Who, obviously you've got to bring your contemporaries in the subject as well, namely the Stones. How does a fucked up unit like the Stones stay and still forge ahead in what they're doing? And I don't want to call the Who a fucked up unit as well, but why doesn't that stay as well alongside it? And how come the Stones survived through all that confusion, and the Who?
Because they're not as complicated in their construction as the Who. I mean, the Stones are always found it much simpler to make albums than us. I mean, I don't know what the Stones songs tried to say, but they didn't seem to be trying to say as much as we.
Yeah,
They just weren't as complicated in their construction. They had a very strong image that didn't really have to change.
It's very basic, isn't it? Sex and drugs and rock and roll.
As far as the Stones are concerned, they could be playing in a different key from each other on stage, and it wouldn't sound any different. They had their sound that just rolled off the stage, and it was quite easy to reproduce. Whereas with us, everything was a lot more complicated. The actual songwriting process was more complicated. Everything took a lot longer. I mean, a couple of the sort of 2-year periods that we had off was like sort of Pete sitting at home writing songs for those whole 2 years, trying to get the material for the next 2 albums, which always had to be better and say something better than the previous one. And I felt that probably the last 3 albums didn't. Kind of got too complicated for their own good.
I think that the main question of all the promotional interviews you're doing lately, I mean, the whole band is, would you be reforming? I mean, I'm asking you especially because last night Pete and Roger were on visitors, and at the end of the interview they were saying that they see a distinct possibility to work together again.
Really? Oh, Roger said that he might work with Pete, but not as a Who.
Yeah, I mean, there's more chance of Marilyn Monroe making another film.
That's right.
It's, I can see us probably working together.
Some
In some future period, because we obviously play well together, but not as the Who, definitely not as the Who. At this present time, the band as they are, and everyone looking to their own individual futures, I can't really see ever getting back together again.
So what happens to friendship?
So then 5-6 years time,
Yeah, that's it.
the situation might change.
What happens to friendship? I mean, are you worried about that?
No, you never socialized actually. I remember you telling me that you never socialized.
Knowing each other for 20 years or whatever.
It's not strained. It's a bit embarrassed at the moment. It's like, I see quite a bit of Kenny, and I speak to Roger on the phone. I saw Pete the other day, but I mean, it's. I think probably when everything's settled down, all the business interests have been dissolved and everything, then we'll be able to sort of get back together as friends. But at the moment, it's like. It's like sort of making conversation at a funeral. There's only a certain amount of things you can say. But I think we'll get together and socialise a little bit more later on. It's a bit painful at the moment.
That's right. Because he just said something there, which I realised it's probably even more complicated to split up to finish the band.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, technically, without obviously having to explain what happens in detail, what it means is you've got to dissolve your company. Is that correct? And
But then we can't even completely do that because we've still got copyrights and royalties tied in. You know, so we've got to have something somewhere, sort of, you know, to take in the money and you know, keep the copyrights going and everything. So we can't completely break up. We can't say goodbye, I'll never see you again, because it's, you know, the Who are still carrying on in old product.
yes.
So what seems to me that the new album was rather ready for the statement that Pete issued. I mean, like you knew in advance that the Who wouldn't work, or was it just coincidental? I mean, have you planned the album? Have you planned the album regardless to the Who activities?
The album, yeah. It was, then the title came out after Pete's
No, because it was rather tongue-in-cheek. You know, pardon should be paid.
Yes, it is.
Right. No, but you were planning album regardless to the...
Oh yeah, the album was done anyway,
Mhm.
regardless of the Who thing. But then when Pete split, then that's when I put Fighting Should Be Painless on there and called it that.
But it rather takes you a long time to do solo album. And there was a, yeah...
It didn't actually.
There is a big gap between your solo albums.
Yeah, well, I've only ever done it up to now. It's only ever been a hobby. It was something to do when the Who weren't working.
That's what I had the impression.
That's
so-
right.
But the way you're doing promotion now, you are really serious to be successful
Yes.
as a solo artist.
That's right.
Whereas before, I mean, it was hardly ever any, but just, you know, it was like a byline to your main
That's right.
activities.
That's right. But now I want to do it. Because the Who isn't there anymore. And I love to sing, I'm not going to give that up. That's it really.
I mean, I've seen you on Oxford Roadshow. When that guy, who is it, Peter Powell, said
Peter
that
Powell.
you had said about playing live. You would have liked to be
Yeah.
there and performed. You really liked
I'm
it.
going to do it, yeah. I reckon this time next year I shall be out on tour.
Why such long time?
'Cause
Because of the
well,
film and everything?
There's a film coming out, a film, and I want to direct a film this year.
You're not going to sign it, I think.
No, I wouldn't direct a film that I'm in. But I'm going to direct a film later on this year, and there also might be a film that I'm in.
Or that you are only
Yeah.
acting.
But it depends. I might get the band together for a TV show in the summer, a live TV show, and then just see how it goes from there. I haven't really got enough material at the moment. I do need another album out with more material.
You wouldn't draw for your previous albums.
Yeah, but I still need more. I might do a few old Who numbers, but do them totally differently, which would be interesting. Because I was only ever an interpreter of those songs anyway, so why not interpret them with a new band? Could be quite interesting.
Let me ask you something about the face dances and its heart. At the time when Peter had the solo album, The Chinese Eyes, he told me that he felt that he was giving you rather personal lyrics to sing at the time of the face dances. Did you feel yourself?
No, I didn't. I can understand why he said that. But all I can say is, for instance, like the song Cash Cash, he wrote that when he was out of his box on the run in Switzerland. I mean, I had sung it from being on the other end, waiting with the group, where the fuck's Pete, looking for Pete. So, you know what I mean, it might have been, he wrote it as personal to him, but I had my own angle on it. So it didn't feel like that, no.
No, but he said it in a way like he was self-accusing, you know, like
Well,
he
he
was
does that
giving
a
you
lot.
to...
I don't think he was being self-accusing, I think he was just picking up from what people were saying in the press. Certain rock critics who can't criticise anything of merit anyway. They've got no right to criticise or saying things like that. And that's usually Pete tends to take notice of what people say about him, and I think he's mad. And the one thing I find has been tragic about those last two albums is that he was attacked because the material was substandard, and I don't think they were at all. I think the band's performances were. On its whole, I think the band performed terrible. I didn't want that album to never come out. It was diabolical. It was just the Who doing what the Who knows how to do again and again and again. Just not pushing any new boundaries or anything. Boring as hell.
No risk involved.
That's right.
What about last year? I was supposed that you have a forever tour and an album. That's not going to come, obviously.
No.
I mean, there was never any material recorded for the possible album, was there?
No. Pete wouldn't do it. No. I mean, we were supposed to do a tour of Europe this year, and the album was supposed to be out this year, and that was going to be the end of the Who anyway. But at least it would have ended up on hopefully on an up, and would have made but he didn't want to do it. So.
I see it. Are you still singing? I mean, how or the rest of the band?
Am I what?
Are you still singing? I mean, the rest of the band.
I see John a bit. Saw Pete a couple of weeks ago, but not really.
No socialising.
No. I've socialised more with John since the band finished than when we was in the band.
Well, yeah, because you must have had enough of each other.
That's right. I like him better when he's not in the band. Really?
And can you tell me something about the film you're making about Craig brothers? As a foreigner, I'm not well aware of what happened to them, who they are and so on.
Well, it doesn't really matter who they are, but it's a story about identical twins and the relationship in this family of people. And their profession is violence, they are gangsters. But one of them is paranoid schizophrenic, and he's gay, and the other one's quite normal. And it's just about that whole relationship. It's very difficult to explain it. It doesn't really matter that you should know about the Craig brothers, you know what I mean? That's not important. It's a film about people, and about this unusual relationship.
Now, when everything is finished with the Who, how do you look upon it? I mean, how do you look on those past years?
That was then, I'm not interested. I don't like nostalgia. I miss the guys, obviously some great times, that's all. That's about it really, I don't think about the past, I think about the future.
You're too busy with the present.
That's right, and the future.
I mean, you're quite an accomplished businessman, actually.
Not really, not a very good one.
But maybe not a good one, but you have quite a few other interests outside the music business, entertainment business, rather.
Well, I mean, I've earned a lot of money, and most of the businesses I'm in partnerships with friends, and it's just a matter of, it's something where you can keep your friends working at what they want to do, and that's all it is. There's nothing more serious than that.
When I was thinking about it, it seemed to me that you're a generation of the 60s, I mean, musically speaking, who's wizened up. None of you ended up like, I don't know, Bill J. Kramer or Brian Paul or somebody like that, you know, they were wasted and exploited and ended up with nothing but, memories.
We've been going so long. I mean, Brian Paul had been going 20 years. Maybe he would have ended up with something. They were a bit one-hit wonders, weren't they?
Yes, but you were on the other side, you know.
You can't make money. Yeah, but you can't make money out of one hit. I mean, everybody thinks if you get one hit record, you're gonna all of a sudden you're gonna be a millionaire. It's not true.
But you started.
You might start to become a millionaire after your 20th gold album.
But you started rather riskily. I mean, with Who smashing all the equipment and so on. You didn't know what the future would hold for you.
I didn't care.
Yeah, but
No,
that's
the
it.
future's never frightened me. We never did it for the money in the first place, so it doesn't matter, does it? But when it comes, you just try and be true to yourself. It's as simple as that. That's all I try to do.
Do you follow what's happening on today's scene?
Yeah, very much.
You do?
Yeah.
And
well,
as being all
the
the
commercial groups, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read the record press, if that's what you mean by follow.
No.
But yeah, very much.
And what does it look like to you? I mean,
Great. I don't like the chart at the moment, but there's a lot of good bands out there. I like Big Country, Alarm, Eurythmics, I think they're terrific. I think Boy George is terrific. Really. I think the music's getting a bit safe. Boy George to me is just like the new Liberace. He's going to be around for years, forever. But again, I think if I was trying to get a band off the ground now and I was a manager, I would be looking for a band equal to the Sex Pistols. That's what it needs at the moment. Someone really dangerous and threatening.
Because the industry has pushed everybody into that commercial zone when everything is safe and the money is turned.
Right.
What do you think of Frankie Goes to Hollywood then? I mean, they're like...
Village People Part 2.
I was rather thinking because the record was banned, you know. And
Yeah, but that's
the
not,
first-
I mean, so what? Doesn't make it great, does it? You listen to it,
No,
it's
no.
just Village People, isn't it? YMCA, relax, don't do it, innit? What's the difference? You know, just because it's banned, there's supposed to be some anarchist group. Just because they sing about pissing, what's wonderful about that? Still not in them grooves, is it?
No.
Well, that's all that matters to me, it's what the music's doing.
Do you think that the new Who is needed? I mean, Who?
The Alarm might be, or Big Country.
But everybody likes to sign the Alarm alongside the Clash.
Oh, I don't think so.
No?
Oh, I don't think so at all, no. It's got to go that way. I mean, rock and roll has been done. The rest of it's almost been done to death now, hasn't it?
Oh,
And saying that, it never seems to go away, does it?
no, it doesn't. It just seems to reincarnate ever so often. But there is that old age question about the age in rock. I mean, do you think that with maturity you tend to go to more subtle areas of music? Not necessarily rock, but you know, jazz influence and you know,
Yes, obviously.
not
because
mellow. I
It's,
don't want to say mellow. But it sounds like I don't know.
it's just mature, isn't it? It is. It's not mellow. It's just mature. Because rock and roll works best with naivety. It wants to be able to make a fool of itself, which is. It's more difficult. I mean, not that you don't do it when you're older. It's just musically, you do need things that mean a bit more than yin yang yin yang. You know.
I mean, after all this year, you don't. I mean, with all these activities going on, you obviously haven't tired of it.
I like to sing.
Is that all that makes you going?
Oh no, I like the business generally.
Do you?
Anything's better than working in a factory.
Oh well, obviously. No, that's not what I meant.
Well, that's what I meant. I love it. It's great. It's really good fun.
Maybe for the elder statesmen of rock, but I don't think that the new kids really have, easy going.